Samira and Rui seemed like the perfect couple, a Moroccan wife and her Portuguese husband whose love story charmed a small coastal town. But behind closed doors, their marriage hid a secret so powerful that when Rui uncovered it, admiration turned to suspicion and love twisted into violence. What began as a tale of romance would soon unravel into one of the most shocking crimes the town had ever witnessed. In 2017, in a quiet fishing town along the Portuguese coast, life moved slowly, guided by the rhythm of tides and the sound of seagulls. It was here that Samira arrived, a Moroccan woman in her mid-20s, carrying only a small suitcase and a heart full of hope. She had met Rui, a local mechanic, a few months earlier while he was visiting Morocco with friends. Their connection had been quick and intense, and against the advice of both families, they married and decided to settle in Portugal. The townspeople were fascinated by Samira. With her dark eyes, graceful posture, and polite manners, she stood out in the narrow streets lined with whitewashed houses. To outsiders, her arrival seemed like the beginning of a love story destined to flourish. Rui appeared proud whenever they were together. He introduced her to neighbors as his beautiful wife, and she adapted quickly, learning bits of Portuguese and smiling shyly when spoken to. To many, she seemed quiet but kind, a woman adjusting to a new land with dignity. Samira's presence gave Rui's life a new sense of purpose. Friends noticed that he no longer lingered late in bars or spent weekends working overtime. Instead, he hurried home, eager to spend evenings cooking simple meals and sharing them with his wife. For the first year, everything appeared calm. Samira kept a modest routine, often walking to the market to buy vegetables or sitting by the window with books in her hands. She rarely spoke of her past, and when questions came about her family or childhood, she brushed them aside with a soft smile. People assumed it was painful for her to be far from home, and they admired her strength. No one imagined that beneath her calm exterior lay a secret that would one day erupt into tragedy. Samira's life in Portugal unfolded like a carefully crafted performance. Each detail of her daily routine was deliberate, a way to maintain the image of a devoted wife and graceful neighbor. She dressed modestly but with elegance, always choosing flowing skirts and colorful scarves that made her stand out in the quiet town. At the bakery, she greeted the workers with soft words and left them smiling. At the market, she carried herself with such poise that other women whispered about her refined manners, envying her ability to appear effortlessly composed. Over time, she became a figure of admiration, someone people looked to as an example of dignity. Her home, with Rui, reflected this outward perfection. The small apartment above his workshop was always spotless, filled with the scent of spices she brought from Morocco. She kept photographs of beaches, sunsets, and flowers on the walls, but none that revealed her past. Rui thought her silence about family was a sign of homesickness, a wound she did not want to reopen. He never pressed too hard, trusting that in time she would share her story. What he did not realize was that the silence was part of her shield, a way of protecting the life she had built from unraveling. As months turned into years, Samira's confidence grew. Women in the neighborhood began asking her advice about clothing or how to cook dishes that smelled foreign yet delicious. She answered with patience, winning their trust and deepening the illusion of her perfect identity. Rui basked in the glow of her reputation, proud that others admired his wife. Yet in moments of solitude, Samira sometimes lingered by the mirror, her gaze heavy with unspoken fears. The mask she wore was flawless, but it was also fragile, waiting for the wrong moment to shatter. Rui first noticed small cracks in the life he thought was unshakable. It began with excuses that felt rehearsed. Whenever the subject of starting a family arose, Samira would smile gently and change the topic. At first, Rui believed her hesitations came from homesickness or the difficulty of adapting to a new country. But as time passed, her refusals became firmer, her explanations more vague. She claimed health issues, then financial concerns, and eventually brushed the subject aside altogether. Rui, once patient, began to feel a quiet frustration that gnawed at him in silence. The doubts grew stronger when he observed her relationship with doctors. Samira avoided medical appointments entirely, dismissing the need even when she suffered minor illnesses. Rui offered to take her to clinics, but she insisted she could heal with rest or herbal remedies. On one occasion, when he pressed harder, she became visibly shaken and refused to speak to him for days. It was then Rui realized her fear was not about doctors themselves, but about something they might reveal. The turning point came late one evening when Rui searched for an insurance document in a drawer they rarely used. Among ordinary papers, he discovered an envelope containing identification cards and certificates written in French and Arabic. The name printed on them was unfamiliar, belonging to someone he had never heard of, and the gender marker was not what he expected. His heart pounded as he read and reread the documents, his mind struggling to reconcile the woman he adored with the stranger suggested by the papers. From that night onward, Rui's perception of his marriage shifted. Every smile, every gesture from Samira seemed suddenly layered with hidden meaning. The life he thought he understood was slipping away, replaced by shadows of questions he could no longer ignore. Rui's discovery left him restless, unable to find peace even in the familiar rhythms of his daily life. At work in the garage, he caught himself staring blankly at engines, his thoughts spiraling back to the documents hidden in the drawer. He replayed moments from his marriage in his mind, searching for signs he had missed. The gentle refusals, the unexplained silences, the carefully guarded past. All of it began to form a pattern that fed his growing obsession. He no longer saw Samira as the graceful wife admired by neighbors, but as a puzzle with missing pieces he felt desperate to complete. At night, when Samira slept beside him, Rui lay awake listening to the sound of her breathing, wondering who she truly was. The sense of betrayal mixed with confusion, twisting his emotions into something darker. He told no one of what he had found, keeping the secret locked inside his chest, yet it burned at him with every passing day. He began scrutinizing Samira's actions, watching the way she dressed, the way she avoided certain questions, the way she quickly changed the subject whenever her past was mentioned. Every movement now seemed like evidence. Instead of seeking answers calmly, Rui allowed suspicion to take root as anger. His pride was wounded, his sense of masculinity bruised by the thought that he had been deceived. He convinced himself that he deserved the truth, and that the secrecy was an act of betrayal rather than protection. This conviction hardened over time, leaving him volatile, pacing the apartment in silence, his eyes heavy with unspoken rage. What once had been love and tenderness was now tangled with resentment. Rui's mind became a storm he could not quiet, and in that storm, violence began to brew. The night of the attack arrived with heavy rain pounding against the narrow streets, the storm outside echoing the turmoil within Rui's mind. Hours of silence had filled the apartment, broken only by the dripping of water from the window frame. Samira moved carefully through the rooms, sensing a tension she could not dispel. Rui's eyes followed her every step, his jaw tight, his thoughts racing with images of the documents and the secrets he believed she had buried. The love that once warmed their home had curdled into suspicion so sharp it seemed to poison the air they breathed. As the evening wore on, the storm grew louder, and Rui's control unraveled. His frustration erupted suddenly, like a dam breaking after years of strain. He lashed out with a fury that shocked even him, overturning furniture and striking Samira with the full weight of his anger. The small apartment became a battleground of crashing objects and desperate cries. Neighbors later described hearing the chaos through the thin walls, a mixture of thuds, shattering glass, and muffled pleas that were quickly drowned by the roar of the rain. Samira fought to shield herself, but Rui's rage was relentless. His hands, once symbols of care and intimacy, now became instruments of destruction. By the time the noise subsided, she lay bloodied and motionless on the floor, her breath shallow but still present. When the police arrived, alerted by frightened neighbors, they found Rui standing in shock, his clothes stained and his expression vacant. He did not resist as they placed cuffs on his wrists, as though the violence had drained the last of his strength. Samira was carried out on a stretcher, her life hanging by a fragile thread as the storm continued to rage outside. The trial that followed became one of the most talked-about cases in Portugal, drawing attention far beyond the quiet coastal town where it had begun. Reporters crowded the courthouse steps each morning, their cameras flashing as Rui was led inside in shackles. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Every seat was filled, and the silence that fell when proceedings began was broken only by the scratching of pens and the clicking of cameras. The once private life of Samira was now a spectacle for strangers, her most intimate truths dissected and analyzed before an audience hungry for scandal. Medical experts were called to testify, revealing details about Samira's gender transition, explaining procedures and documents that Rui had discovered in secret. These revelations ignited heated debates both inside and outside the courtroom. Some saw her secrecy as understandable, a way to protect herself in a world where prejudice was common. Others echoed Rui's defense, arguing that he had been deceived and driven into an emotional collapse. The prosecution, however, painted a stark picture, a man who, instead of seeking understanding or help, chose violence as his response. Samira sat quietly through the proceedings, her face partially obscured by bandages, her body weakened but her presence steady. Every word spoken about her identity felt like a fresh wound, her life turned into evidence for strangers to examine. Rui, on the other hand, remained rigid, his expression alternating between defiance and despair as his actions were laid bare. The trial stretched on for weeks, each day peeling back another layer of the story. By its end, the narrative of love and betrayal had been overshadowed by the brutal reality of violence. What the court had to decide was not just guilt, but how much weight secrecy carried against the act of attempted murder. Rui's sentencing brought the case to a dramatic close, but the echoes of what happened lingered far longer than the judge's final words. He was given a lengthy prison term, his future swallowed by concrete walls and steel bars. For many, it seemed a fitting end to a story marked by rage and betrayal. Yet outside the courtroom, the consequences of that night continued to unfold in ways no sentence could erase. Samira survived, but the scars carved into her body and spirit served as permanent reminders of the violence she had endured. Every movement became a test of resilience. Every glance in the mirror a confrontation with memories she wished she could forget. The town, once so eager to admire her elegance, now spoke of her in hushed tones. For some, she remained a victim, a woman who had suffered unspeakable cruelty. For others, she was reduced to a symbol of secrecy and controversy. Whispers about her past circulated endlessly, twisting her story into gossip stripped of compassion. The same neighbors who once envied her grace now treated her as an outsider, a figure marked by scandal. Nationally, the case ignited fierce debates about gender identity, trust, and violence within relationships. Commentators on television and in newspapers argued over who bore responsibility for the tragedy, each opinion dividing the public further. Some saw it as proof of the dangers faced by those who lived authentically, while others clung to Rui's narrative of betrayal. Samira herself remained silent, refusing interviews, seeking instead a life away from the relentless scrutiny. Years later, the memory of the Moroccan wife in Portugal still lingered like a shadow. The story became a cautionary tale told in fragments, reminding people how quickly love can curdle into hatred and how secrets, once revealed in anger, can destroy everything in their path.